Welcome to Real World, Real Talk with Dr. DZ Cofield. The show represents captivating conversations and insightful information to encourage and inspire you with all you need to become the best you can possibly be. And now, your host for Real World, Real Talk, Dr. DZ Cofield.
Welcome to Real World, Real Talk. I'm your host, Dr. DZ Cofield, and I'm happy to welcome you to our virtual studio today. Man, I am so excited in the midst of everything that's going on, COVID-19 pandemic, and now this racist pandemic that we are dealing with literally around the world. We're seeing things change and we're dealing with global grief. I mean, it's just so much stuff going on, but I'm really thankful and excited to have our guest with us on today. And I'm really looking forward to this interview. I'll tell you about our guest in just a moment. Let me just take care of a couple of housekeeping matters. If you'd like to follow me during the week, you can follow me on Instagram at DZ Cofield. You can follow me on Twitter at DZ Cofield. And you can follow me on Facebook at, you guessed it, DZ Cofield. We're going to continue to highlight these stories that we hope and pray will produce the kind of change in our society that we want to see. Let me also remind all of our listeners, when we say Black Lives Matter, we're not saying only Black Lives Matter. A lot of people are pushing back on that phrase, saying all lives matter. They'll also say blue lives matter, talking about the police, but they won't say Black Lives Matter, which suggests that they only have a problem with the word black. But the truth of the matter is, when we say Black Lives Matter, we say Black Lives Matter because Black lives are in danger, especially those of Black men. This past week, we saw thousands of people come out to view the remains and celebrate the life of George Floyd. People watched all over the world as he was laid to his final resting place. And there were several people that were in attendance, including mothers of the movement. One of them is our guest today. After July 17th, 2014, and the death of her son, Eric Garner, at the hands of New York City police officers on Staten Island went viral, Gwen Carr's life changed forever. The illegal chokehold that took Garner's life has been seared into the public consciousness forever as the large Black man struggled to breathe while a white policeman held him down on a hot concrete sidewalk. His death set the tone for a new normal where young Black men and women now automatically document police interactions with their cell phones for fear of brutality and even death. As one of the mothers of the movement, Gwen Carr, a retired transit train operator, now dedicates her time to fighting for racial equality, especially the way law enforcement treats Blacks in the United States. She has written a book, This Stops Today, where she shares the tragedies she's faced, recalling her son's life and death, and recounts her newfound role as an activist in the fight for racial equality. Join me in welcoming to Real World, Real Talk, none other than Mrs. Gwen Carr. Mrs. Carr, thank you for being with us today on Real World, Real Talk. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, and thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, we've had some challenges, but I'm sure glad you made it. So I know you and the mothers of the movement were here. Several mothers who have lost their sons in violent deaths in tragic ways, some to police misconduct, some to other vigilantism that we have seen spread around our country. So I want to ask you a couple of questions today and give our audience some insight into where you are and what's been happening. First of all, congratulations. Today, you saw a bill signed into law in New York. Can you tell us and our listening audience what was transpiring and what happened?
Almost 5 years ago, I put a bill out there. It was the Eric Garner chokehold bill, is what we wanted to call it. And I fought to get this bill into law, and it would never pass. It kept on, just getting, well, dying on the floor, I would say. But now, since the legislators, they decided that they were going to pass the bill. So it's the Eric Garner chokehold restraint bill. And what it does is, when the police officer chokes someone, and they not only get disciplined by the police department, they get disciplined like we would get disciplined. They will get a felony charge. It will be a Class C felony, and they could go to jail for up to 15 years. And so I'm glad that that's done, although we're going to have to work on more particulars on that bill, but at least we do have something on the books.
So, it's very interesting. Your son was killed in 2014. Tell me what you felt when you saw the footage of George Floyd and you heard his cries, those words that your son made famous. Players and people wore shirts saying, "I can't breathe." How did you feel to hear that coming out of another person's mouth? And George, I think, was the same age as Eric. Is that right?
About, yes.
Yeah.
I think he's 46. Eric will be 50 come this birthday. That what I'm going to try to do is celebrate his birthday instead of the day he died, which I usually do. Not, I don't celebrate, but I commemorate.
Yeah.
And but yeah, so when I did hear the particulars about what happened to this young man, it was like deja vu all over again. I could not believe that another young man had been choked, even though the officer didn't put his arms around his neck, but he put his knee on his neck. And I know what excruciating pain that young man went through. So I was just feeling shivers all over my body. I could not look at the video in its entirety. I never looked at the video, actually. Sometime on TV it comes and I see the bits and pieces, but it's just too painful to watch.
I can only imagine. I can only imagine how challenging it would be. You are one of only a few people who could talk to the Floyd family and say to them, I know how you feel. I know what you're going through. Tell us a little bit about that conversation when you spoke to them, because my understanding was you reached out to them, you wanted to talk to them, you wanted to share in their pain.
I did, because their the incident with their brother mimicked my son so closely, and I just got just such a horrific feeling when I to know what the family is going through. So I did reach out to them. I said to them, I stand in solidarity with you. And I said, I know the darkness that you're feeling, but as time goes on, please keep on fighting. And I told them about one of the police officers had gotten arrested. I said, that's great, because it took 5 years for them to even fire one of the police officers that was on my case. I said, and then I never got complete justice because the other officers never stood accountable for my son's murder. So I told them to please fight, to keep fighting. I said, doors are going to close in your face, but you keep on knocking on the next door, because just because the police officer has gotten fired and arrested, it's not a slam dunk. I said, take it from me. But I said, I will stand with you. I will be with you. If you need anything, any questions asked, I will try to answer them. And they were very humble. And even when I met with them physically, they were still the brother, the one that you seen crying on TV. Um, he just hugged me. We hugged each other, and I just felt his pain so severely. It was just heart wrenching.
Yeah. You know, we called him Big Floyd. Those of us who knew him, and I did know him. My children knew him. He was really close with my daughter, and he worked with us on projects here in Third Ward, where he grew up, CUNY Homes, and helped us in our church and outreach projects and feeding the seniors and just all kinds of stuff. Was really such a positive person. And when I first heard about the story, of course I didn't know it was him. And then it's like from Houston, and then when I found out who it was, I'm like, man, what was George doing up in Minnesota? And it's interesting because my youngest son went to college there, and so I was able to contact a friend of mine, and he was able to share with me a lot of the tension in Minnesota and what was going on. And I think you're right. I was surprised as well that the officers were fired so quickly, because I know how powerful many of those police unions are. Um, and I'm sure you ran into that as well with you trying to pass that legislation.
But it wasn't because of the political aspect that he was fired so quickly. The quickness came from really the civilians on the ground. They have a group out in Minnesota called Boots on the Ground. And just before the pandemic, that's where I was in Minnesota, commemorating one of the mother's children who had been murdered by police. Okay, so one of the ladies who was at that commemoration, me and her was on a phone call together. We were on an interview on a radio station together. And when she started talking, and she was reminding me that we met at the last commemoration that I had been to back in March. And so then, but she is the one that got the police officers' names so fast and had the police officers' names in the newspaper the next day, because she talked to a news editor, and gave up their names. Because when the video was taken and she got hold of the video, she blew the video up, the frames up, and she got the badge numbers of the police officers. And by her getting the badge numbers, she connected the names to them. So that's why the next day, the police officers' names are never in the paper when something like this happened.
No, never. You're right. Absolutely.
So she is the one that, because when I read it, I was saying, wow, they got the police officers' names? That is surprising, because this is what we're fighting for in New York. We're trying to change the 50A law, repeal it, in which we did get it repealed. The New York mothers did get that law repealed. That was one of the bills that was signed yesterday. And so she is the hero. The one who took the video and the one who blew the video up are the two heroes of this situation. And a lot of people don't know that. But by me talking and being on an interview with her, I found this out.
Wow. That's something. So why do you feel the murder of George Floyd has ignited this international anger and rage? What do you think was significant about that?
Okay. I think it was because it was deja vu for them also. They seen when my son was murdered. They seen when Eric Garner was murdered and how the masses came out. They seen how we marched for days, we marched for weeks, and then everything quieted down. And then it was basically business as usual for them. For the crowds it was, for the media it was, but not for me. It wasn't business as usual because I kept fighting. But so now this time, when they see the same situation happening in another state, and it almost everything is almost the same, even the size of the person. I guess they say, wow, this is keep on happening. We can't just let it go. And I think this is why the masses, even the people, the white people, now you see even more of them. There were some in my son's marches, but not a lot. But there were some. And this one, it's just everybody. Everybody is in the march. And now they don't want to let go until there is legislation, because I even tell them, when the cameras go away, most of the time the people go away. It only leaves you to fight, and ever who wants to help you fight. Those are the only people who's going to be left. So I says, once you're finished, when you are finished demonstrating in the street, you have to go to legislation. And this is the only way that we are going to get laws changed. Because to demonstrate and to protest is to bring awareness. That's what we're doing now. We are bringing awareness to everyone that we are being treated so badly, so cruelly. It's just wrong the way that we are being treated. So now when everybody stands up and pay attention, even though we see America saying, oh, this is not right, it's costing us a lot of money, but they don't realize it's costing us a lot of our children's lives. Things can be replaced. Our children's lives can't.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Real World, Real Talk. I'm your host, Dr. Cofield, and you're listening to my guest, Mrs. Gwen Carr, who is the mother of Eric Gardner. Some would say he is the flashpoint, the start of Black Lives Matter, started with Eric Gardner. And what's interesting, Mrs. Carr, I did an interview last week with the local organizer for Black Lives Matter, and I asked him what was different this time as opposed to when your son was murdered. And he made an interesting observation. He said, people think we've been sitting silent. We've been preparing for this day the whole time. We've been training people. We have been challenging white people on their white fragility and white privilege and the responsibility that they have to the human race, which has resulted in protests springing up all over the world. The other thing that he said that I thought was interesting, for those of us who are looking in from the outside, we think it's organic. There's no leader, but there's a strategy behind this, because if there is no one leader, then no one person can be taken out and stop this work, that this work is bigger than any one person. As you've talked to the mothers in the movement, what has been a common ground for you all? I know there were several mothers who were at the funeral. The mother of Trayvon Martin was at the funeral. Philando Castile was murdered in Minneapolis. That was one of the reasons people there were angered over this killing. What are you and the mothers talking about? Because you all have a bond that nobody can really understand.
Yes, that's true. The mothers of the movement, they do have a bond that no one wouldn't understand and don't want to be a part of. But when we talk to each other, we have to say, wow, this is happening. We got to do something, which we all do something in our own way. We all have our own foundations, our own organizations, but we meet up with each other when our events come up. We love on each other, we embrace and we empower. And then we try to empower mothers. They call us the mothers of the movement, but there's tens of thousands of mothers of the movement, because there are mothers that no one ever heard of, mothers that never got any publicizing in the papers, no publicizing on TV, and their son was murdered and they were unarmed, these innocent children. If you hear the stories, One tragedy gets worse than the next, but these were not captured with video, and most of these stories got swept under the rug. So when people like myself, Trayvon Martin's mother, Michael Brown's mother, when we get a platform, we must bring all of them to the platform, because there are so many faceless and nameless mothers and fathers out there who don't know what to do. There are mothers that can't get out of bed after these heinous crimes takes place. There are mothers who are on medication, mothers who have tried or successfully committed suicide. And a lot of nobody pays this no attention. But soon as a police officer gets in trouble because now they know they did wrong, although they're not going to admit to it, everybody on the police side start taking up donations for the police in case he needs a lawyer. But what do they do for the families? So that's why we, as mothers of the movement, we have to be there for the families. And people like Al Sharpton, he's there for the families. So the mothers and the fathers, they need a support group too. And it seems like they always give it to the police. And this is what we talk about when we are together, or sometimes we strategize on what can we do about this. And a lot of times we make a lot of noise, we do press conference, and myself, living in New York, I go and I visit the legislators up in Albany, because I don't believe in writing letters. I don't believe in talking on the phone to them. I believe in getting into their face and telling them my demands. So they know me. They know when they see me coming, they know I'm coming with some kind of demand, what I want to ask them to support me in. And when I ask for support for myself, I'm asking for support for each and every mother around the country.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you wrote a book. The title of the book is "This Stops Today." It was published in 2018. I listened to uh, the intro, and it was written by Senator uh, Hillary Rodham Clinton, and I thought it was interesting because uh, she says in that intro that you're at a point now in your life where you have retired and you should be taking it easy, but instead you have embraced the activism that has been handed to you because of the tragic murder of your son. Can you talk about why you wrote that book and why it was so important?
Well, I wanted people to know of how I lived before the murder of my son, what I did during the murder of my son, and what I'm doing now. And actually, for what I'm doing now, it's a call to action. I'm asking everybody to do their part, whatever it is. Everybody don't protest. Everyone don't go and visit legislators. People do what they do best. And that's all I ask them to do. And most of all, I ask them to vote, because a lot of times people think that their vote doesn't mean anything. And I want them to know that the vote that you have is the strongest tool that you have. So please go out and vote. And if the vote didn't mean anything, why would millionaires spend millions of dollars to try to restrict our vote and try to distort where we're going to vote? So I talk about that. I talk about the type of person my son was, how he was like an athlete in school, how he went to college, how he loved Christmas. And, it's just so many things that I bring out. I tell about the life I lived growing up in Brooklyn. And so, and another thing, Hillary Clinton wrote my foreword for me. So, and it's very interesting that when my children were growing up, I tried to protect them, because their father died at a very early age, and I tried to be the mother and father to them. I tried to do the things that a mother and a father would do. And so it just says that no matter what you try to do, sometimes it just don't work out, because our children are so vulnerable out here in these streets, and it shouldn't be like that. And I just hope that everyone just love on their children, and when you send them out the door, kiss them and tell them that you love them, because us as blacks in the black community, we don't know if our sons is going to come home or not. And it's so bad to have that feeling. Every time, like if he doesn't come home one time, where is he? You're jumping when the phone rings. That's not a way to live, and we got to stop having to live like that.
How does it feel to hear your son's name mentioned all over the world, and to know that there is renewed interest in his case? There's renewed thoughts about um, his case and who he is, and you get another opportunity to tell the story of Eric Garner. How does it make you feel to hear his name mentioned all over the world?
I mean, I have mixed emotions, because I'm glad that everyone knows his name. Uh, but I wish no one but the family knew his name. I wish he was still here. But being
Mm,
that he's not, I'll just, say that it's heartfelt, and then it's sad at the same time, because we really didn't get the justice that we deserved for Eric. I'm still fighting for the justice that we deserve for him. After all that fighting, at the departmental trial, I got one officer fired, no criminal charges, and that's not enough. That doesn't send a clear message. And that's what we have to do. We have to send clear messages to these legislators, to this police department. We have to do something about it. It's too much deep-seated hate that's in the police departments. The police, they do what they want to us in these communities. So enough is enough, I say. Let's just stop, pretending that you don't know that this is happening. Police stations, they know what's going on. This is their house. The commanders and, all the higher ups, they know what's going on in their house. So now, if you need to clean house, you need to get rid of some of those police officers, that's what you do. Okay? Don't just let them stay there and keep killing our children. Just like the police officers in my case, they're back out on the street, except one. They could be harming other citizens right now. They don't belong on the streets.
yeah, I think it's interesting because, I changed um, uh, my philosophy around this. I, my father was a New York City police officer. Actually, when I saw that you were a transit operator, he worked transit for a time, and then started walking a beat. And he would always tell me about some of the crazy things that were going on, and he was more concerned in working to be a good cop. He was more concerned about being killed by bad cops than he was concerned about being killed by criminals. It was just really, really weird. I mean, just to hear him talking. When I told him I wanted to be a police officer, and he was like, "No, you cannot be. No, there's no way." And I think you're right. I used to believe, hey, we're not going to paint all cops with a broad brush. There are good cops out there, but I'm coming to the conclusion now: you're not a good cop if you keep letting bad cops stay on the force, because now you're complicit in your silence. If you know that they're bad officers, then you have a responsibility to speak up, and there need to be mechanisms put in place because nobody should want bad police officers on the street. Citizens shouldn't want it. Police officers, good police officers shouldn't want it. Nobody should want bad officers on the street. One of the things that's happened with me, and I'm nobody, but I've had friends of mine and people that I know. I'm working with a lot of white churches now, helping them to think through this. And they're apologizing to me, saying, "Wow, we didn't know it was this bad. Man, we had no idea." And have you had people apologize to you and come up and say, "You know what? We had no idea." Like they thought maybe your son was an isolated case, and now they're really seeing that this is as much a pandemic as COVID-19?
Definitely. There are more people now saying, I'm sorry this happened to your son. Um, what can we do? And the ones that I get to talk to, I says, you can't just be sorry. You have to do something. You have to talk to your counterparts. You have to let them know how deep this goes. Because see, people who doesn't come from our world, which means our communities, they don't understand because they don't know that our reality is not their reality. They don't have people coming in, knocking their doors down in the middle of the night and killing their loved ones. They don't have that happen. They don't have people, the police coming and shooting up a person. And when they shoot us 15, 20, 30, 40 times. You have never, ever read where they shot a white man that many times. So if that's not hate and racism, what is? And police should are sworn to serve and protect. I hear that all the time, but we know that is not always the case. We know that they feel like once they see someone in a black neighborhood, if they got to go in there, if they hear one sound, it's all right for them to shoot. If they fear so much of being in the neighborhood, they shouldn't come into the neighborhoods. First of all, I think people who've grown up in the kind of neighborhoods that they lived in should police those neighborhoods. Because why should we get shot and then when they found out that we didn't do anything, we weren't a threat, and all they say is, oops. Oops, we dead. You can't bring us back. So I just feel like it's something that needs to be done. One lady told me, one white lady said, when she heard us talking about how we fear for our children to get stopped in a traffic stop because we don't know how they're going to walk away from, if they're going to walk away from that traffic stop. And when she listened to what I had to say, at the end of the segment, she came up to me. She said, I had no idea that all of this was going on. She says, I have been stopped by the police for speeding. She says, but when they came up to me, I had no fear of them hurting me. I was just angry because I got caught speeding. And I just wanted them to hurry up and give me the ticket and let me be on my way. So that's all she said. I just be angry when they come up to me. And she said, even though I know I did wrong. But she said she never fathomed about being killed or hurt or shot by a police officer.
It's amazing how the police officer in Georgia walked up to a car, was captured on his dash cam. And obviously it was a white person or a non-black. And when they complained or said something to him about being afraid, he said, well, don't you know we only kill black people? And
I have that video on my phone right now.
yeah, and I'm sitting there going, okay, was he joking or not? And does he not know that that's not a good joke? Not funny. And obviously the police chief didn't think so either, because he was being fired from his job. And it's just sad. I will say, just in confirming what you said, I literally, on the evening that my newest grandson was born, I thought about my life. He was born May the 28th. I thought about my two sons. I thought about my new grandson, and I saw myself in George Floyd's position. And I was literally afraid to leave the house. And I'm the son of a police officer. I mean, but I felt tears, coming down in my spirit. I was just that afraid. And you're absolutely right. White people have no idea what it means to deal with that kind of fear.
They don't.
What are you working on now? You just got this bill passed, and I know I'm asking you this question. You're kind of catching your breath, but what's the next step for you? What do you see needing to be done next?
Well, I guess wherever this journey takes me, I'm going to still try to get more bills passed. My name is on several bills, and I'm going to fight for those to be passed, uh, even though several has been passed, and I'm grateful for it. All of it is not what we want exactly, but you're never going to get everything you want. But we have to be thankful for getting the little pieces and then add to the pieces. And that's the way I feel, because sometimes we get nothing. And that's why we have to keep on fighting, because if you don't fight, you stop, they're going to stop. They're glad you stopped. And I want to mention about a point what you made just a little while ago about your father saying that he was more afraid of the police officers killing him than the bad guy. Now, if you watch and you see the news, I know here in New York, there's been a lot of killings of police officers, and then they tried to blame it on the person who they're trying to apprehend. Oh, they made me shoot him. And if you see a video, it was one that was so sad. The police officer ended up dead, and the perpetrator. Well, he really wasn't a perpetrator. He was standing waiting for a cab, and these police officers attacked him. And when it was all over, the the victim was on the ground. The police officer was dead. It's crazy. How do you shoot? Why would you shoot at your partner if he's on top of the victim? I mean, at the victim and your partner is on top of him. And I said, and they call it friendly fire. I call it unfriendly fire, because a lot of these officers are waiting for opportunity to shoot their partner for one reason or another. I guess they are looking into it, but they need to look into this further, because this should not happen. You know, you got a vendetta against the police, your fellow police officer, and you waiting for a situation to shoot him so that you could get away with it. It's so much corruption go deep in the police department.
Yeah, it's amazing when the president of the PBA made the statement that he made regarding um, police officers being treated like thugs and criminals. And I thought to myself, welcome to the club. Like, black men have been treated like thugs and criminals, you know, without justification our entire lives. And so I just found that very, very ironic that he would use those terms and be upset around that. Um,
Right.
what do you want to say to those who are listening? Uh, I don't know if there's anybody that has the credibility to speak to this issue like the
Hmm.
mothers of the movement. What do you
Uh-huh.
want to say with the platform that God has tragically provided to you, to those who are listening?
I would like to say to those mothers, fathers, even the kin folks out there of these children, of these fallen children, and those of you who haven't experienced it yet, you have to help us to help you, because we do not want you to have to join this club. And the mothers who are already in this club, we want to reach out to you. We want to embrace and empower you. Some of you mothers don't know what to do. You don't know how to do it. But we, as the mothers, we are here. We are here to try and help you. So don't feel alone, and keep on saying your child's name. You have to lift up your child's name. A lot of mothers have told me, when you go, when you say my son's name, but you can say your son's name the most effectively. People will listen. You know his story. You know how he was like. You tell what made you laugh about him, the silly things he did. All of this, humanize your child. Do not let the police, do not let the papers, the media define who your child was. And because you know they're going to criminalize them, they're going to bring up, if they had any kind of record, if the school record, any record that they can find, they're going to bring it out to criminalize him and demonize him. So don't let that go without you getting out there and saying who your child was and who he was to you.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. We saw that with George, and we tried to, those of us who knew him and loved him, wanted to make sure we got that story out of the George that we
Right.
knew and loved.
That's right.
Yeah. Mr. Carr, I got to tell you, I love you. I appreciate you so much. Your strength, your perseverance, um, your tenacity, because you're absolutely right. If you give up, things will just go back. How are you seeing things change now? And do you feel better today as you look into the future and you see millions of young people around the world protesting? How do you feel about the future?
Well, I'm feeling a little bit more positive about the future, but they have to know they can't let up. You're angry today, but you cannot be just in a moment. You have to be in a movement to make this work. Because a moment, it's like you get mad and you try and you jump up and you do something about what's going on. A movement, after you get mad, now you plan out a strategy of how you're going to keep this going. And that's what we all need to be, is in a movement and not a moment.
Wow, that's that's amazing. What for you on Tuesday was the most moving time at the homegoing of George?
Ooh, the most moving was I think in Minnesota. It was a lot of moving moments, a lot of moments that brought tears to my eyes. Everything was coming back to me of when my son was murdered. But the most moving is when I was on the stage and we were being silent for that 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And to see how long 8 minutes and 46 seconds really is. And to think about, this young man was in agony for 8 minutes and 46 seconds and crying out that he couldn't breathe and calling for his mother. That was like an echo from the grave for me. So I just couldn't hardly hold it together when this happened. And I know for a lot of people, it was the same for some of the family, that it was just darkness, a hole in your heart. It it was like, how can a human being be so cruel to the next human being? And the crazy thing about it, now we find out that that officer knew George. So it was first degree murder.
Yeah, that was for me the most amazing thing. I'm like, wait a minute, he knew him, so there was intentionality in what he did.
That's right.
Clearly, there was something in his heart. He had some feelings for George or about George that we're not aware of.
And that's so true.
Yeah.
That is so true. It had to be, because most of the time, if you, I don't care what profession you're in, and if something like this occurs, and even if you're called to the scene, you're the officer, you call to the scene, and you see that it's one of your co-workers or whatever, a lot of times you're a little more easier. You may walk up to him and say, man, what's going on here? Why, you're being arrested. You try to ease the situation, tell your partners, oh, I know him. Especially, there's no real crime being done. He's not trying to hurt anybody. He's just standing there. There's no way that you should have acted like that and took
Right.
his life like that.
No, absolutely. It
That.
it was very clear. Yeah. Yeah. I heard someone talk about when they put him in the car, um, that there was a lot of jostling in the car. They were
I
looking for
heard that.
that footage as well.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I heard that.
You have a lot of mothers out here who are hurting. What do you say to them?
I just tell them, I know that they're in a dark place. I tell all mothers, especially when it's just happened to you and you're new to this, you're in a dark place, but and you're going to grieve, but you have to take your grief, harness your grief, and get out there. And even though it's too late for your child, try to get justice for your child and get justice for the others that are out there, because we never know, who we might save while we are on the trail of voicing our opinion, sharing our story, and sooner or later someone will have to listen. America has made us uncomfortable by murdering our children. We have to make America uncomfortable. They don't want to face the reality. They just want to sweep things under the rug. No, we must make you stand up and make your officers stand accountable for their wrongdoings. And the only way we're going to do that is we got to fight. And when I say fight, we have to get laws changed. And it's not easy. I could tell you firsthand, it's not easy to get a law changed. You have to go through a lot of stipulations to get a law change. But first of all, before you probably could get any laws changed, you got to make sure who's in power, who are your lawmakers, how can they bring something to the table that's beneficial to you. So, as I said earlier, the vote is very important. And don't just vote in the national election, it's the local election that affects you the most, because that's how we choose who's going to be on our school boards. And the children are very, very important because they are our future. So get up every election, no matter how small you think it is. It's important because those are the elections that affect you the most.
What will you say as we get ready to close to those who are on the sidelines and not involved, both black and white, who have basically said, you know what, it's not my family, it's not my child. I'm basically gonna mind my own business. What do you say to those people who are sitting on the sidelines?
Well, I would tell the people standing on the sidelines, you better get on board, because you never know when it's going to come knocking on your door. And when it comes knocking on your door and you have not a leg to stand on, and you are going to be crying, now you're going to want someone to help you. But you should help someone else before it becomes your turn, and hope that it never becomes your turn. But we never know. In this climate, we have corona and we have corruption. So anything could happen, and we have to try to prevent it. And with that said, I think the marches are making a statement. They are bringing the awareness. So now we got to keep this up, and we got to make it broader.
Yeah, we saw our mayor issue a statement at the funeral that he was issuing executive orders to end chokeholds. We hear legislators talking about they're going to change laws, but we also need to change people's hearts. And so we'll see where this goes. Thank you so much for being with us today. I appreciate it. We've gone through all kinds of stuff, all kinds of technical issues, but we made it through. I appreciate you so much.
Yeah, we did. We did.
All right. Thank you so much.
The
late Vernon John said, if you see a good fight, get in it. I always add, if you don't see a good fight, start one. And you don't have to start a good fight to get involved in this fight. This fight is unbelievable, what we see going on in our country. And I think Mrs. Carr said it so well. We've got COVID, we got corona, and we've got corruption. And this corruption is so deep-seated in the soil of this country, and it affects every aspect of what we do. We're looking at police brutality. We're looking at the murdering of Black men who shouldn't die for what would amount to a misdemeanor. But here's what's interesting. This is just the tip of the iceberg. What we're seeing with police officers, we're seeing in that school to prison pipeline, we're seeing it in our educational system with our children who are undereducated and virtually unemployable when they graduate. We're seeing it in healthcare with health disparities throughout our country in areas that are predominantly lived in by Black and brown people. We're seeing it economically with redlining and the like, where banks are not willing to invest in predominantly populated communities of color. So what does that mean? That means this fight has to be far-reaching. It has to be comprehensive. If we're going to win this battle, we're going to have to fight on multiple fronts. So I want to encourage you to get involved. I'm Dr. DZ Cofield. You've been listening to Real World, Real Talk. Thank you for being with me on today. Thank you for doing what you're doing. And if you're not doing anything, as Mrs. Carr said, get off the sidelines. The person you're fighting for today may be your child who is yet alive. And if you can pass a law, if you can pass a policy, if you can get a politician elected to change laws, and we can do what we need to do on the spiritual side to change hearts, we might just have a better place to live. And even more importantly, our children and our grandchildren will have a better place to live. Until next time, this is Dr. DZ Cofield signing off. You've been listening to Real World, Real Talk. Listen, make sure you catch me on next time. All right? Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Real World, Real Talk. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast to be notified of new episodes every week. Follow us via social media using the @RWRTDZ username on all platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To submit any comments, questions, sponsor opportunities, or future show suggestions, visit us online at rwrtdc.com or via email at info@rwrtdz.com. Thank you for listening, and we hope you've been inspired to be the change you want to see in the world today. Until next time, be real, Keep it real and stay real.